My whole life is by design. And again, I was on this plane yesterday and I was showing somebody how I audit my network. So I literally have a process by which I write my 5 core values across the top and I rate every single person that comes into my life, whether they're out of alignment, somewhat in alignment, or totally in alignment with my core values.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm very excited for today's guest, Mr. Matt King. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Phil. How are you, man? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Matt is, I think, Midwestern, but converted to Southwest. So he was Minneapolis, not maybe Minnesota. No, you're a cheesehead.
Yeah, right behind me, man. I got the Packers helmet. Yeah,
sorry, I do not want to offend you, but then converted to a Longhorn. So
yes, sir.
For our listeners, Matt, CEO of a mastermind group called GoBundance. He's been involved in that for a long time, and I suspect we may talk about it. But Matt's a great guy, very smart, but also that's probably shaped him in a lot of different ways. So we'll hear about that. Business executive and entrepreneur, and really with a goal to empower others to live abundantly. Also has been doing some keynote speaking and is really impactful. I've seen him on the stage. He's had a lot of impact on me. So Matt, let's start with kind of how did the journey started? And, from a personal and professional perspective, what brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I would tell you, like, there's been so many things that have brought me to where I'm at today. And the number one thing that's gotten me to where I'm at, I tell people all the time, is I've gotten lucky in life. And the thing I'll tell you, Phil, is I think we all get lucky in life, but the thing we overlook is that we create our own luck in life. Like, you have to put yourself in a position to get lucky. And I was very fortunate to be raised by 2 incredible parents back in Wisconsin, have incredible people around us. And my parents encouraged me to put myself in a position to get lucky, which oftentimes, by the way, means you have to encourage yourself to put yourself in a position where you're really uncomfortable. Because when you look at it, you go, oh, wow, that's scary. Then it works out in your favor. Like, oh, I got lucky. But at the end of the day, you overcame fear. You put yourself in an uncomfortable spot. And so, I come from a background of my parents, like, celebrating failure and, like, not being afraid to push me. I'll never forget when I was about 10 years old, I went to my mom and said, hey, Mom, I want to order a pizza for dinner. And she said, great. And she put $20 on the table and she put the phone book on the table and she said, figure it out. And I think that was one of the greatest gifts my parents could ever give me, honestly, is they've taught me that I have the ability to find the way or make the way to do whatever I set out to achieve. Now, along this journey, I've been, fortunate to marry an incredible woman who too has incredible parents, like most down to earth Midwest people you'll meet. But then I've also been fortunate to be around really incredible people inside of GoBundance. Like, I've ran David Osborne's family office for probably the last 3-4 years, but I've been involved in his organization for the last 10. I've worked side by side with him for the last 10 years. I met Pat Hyben, who's one of the founders of GoBundance, at a camp for children with incarcerated parents, remained curious, remained, sort of open-minded, and asked, like, what could I learn from this human? And so when you look at your life and you get to where you are in life, like, the number one thing I'm trying to focus on, Phil, is I believe that I've gotten here through curiosity. And I'm trying to remain in curiosity. Like, I can learn something from every single person I meet every single day, whether it's the janitor or whether it's the guy that I'm buying a dirt bike from, right? And I could give you a live example of this. Like, I bought a ranch recently down here in Texas, and I thought it'd be a great idea to get into breeding Longhorns because I know absolutely nothing about cattle. So I might as well do that, right? Like, I'm bored. I got nothing else to do. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know anything about it. But I went on Craigslist, found a guy selling a Longhorn, remained curious, asked him about himself, how he got into it. And, like, the next thing you know, this guy's sending me videos daily of, this is how to set up your fence. This is how to know if your bull's in heat. This is how to know if your calf's this. It's like, and he's educating me more than I ever thought possible, all because I reached out to him through Craigslist and was in curiosity mode. Like, hey, man, how are you? What are you looking for? Why are you doing this? What's going on? And I just constantly am trying to ask questions. So when you boil that question down, it's like, where are you? How'd you get here, etc. I would tell you like it's really two things for me. It's one, remaining in curiosity, and it's two, knowing that I have the ability to find the way or make the way to do whatever I set out to do.
I love that. I love that. Um, so I want to talk, this is a little bit of a tangent, but you talked about your childhood
Yeah.
and failure. Your kids are how old?
5, 3, and then due in September.
Congratulations. I don't know if
Thank
I
you.
knew that.
No, that's
How
new to
are
me.
you how do you teach your kids that failure is okay to kind of shape, like, how do you think about this
Yeah.
with your kids that are at a very young and formidable age?
Yeah, so like I think the number one way that we can teach people is we can celebrate. My daughter falls and scrapes her knee, celebrate it. My son breaks something, celebrate it. Like, and I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imaginations. Like there's my son will throw something and it breaks and I might get frustrated, but at the end of the day, like, celebrate the failure, like celebrate the at least the courage to take the chance. And then the other thing is talk about it. So, I'm not afraid to have a conversation with my kids and say, hey, I'm scared. I'm not afraid to put myself in a position every year to be scared and show them that I can persevere through that fear, regardless of success or failure. In 2021, I rode a bull. Like, why did I ride a bull? Because I wanted to put my mind and my body and my being to the test to see what fear really felt like and to understand that on the other side of fear is this beautiful life, this beautiful opportunity. But so few of us actually experience that beauty because we get paralyzed by the fear. So with my children, like literally 3 days ago, I took my daughter out and my son out to the ranch in the morning before school. We had like a little dad kid day, and I was like, hey, let's go screw around at the ranch before 8 o'clock class. And so I told them we are going to go into the pasture and we were going to check on the longhorns and stuff. And my daughter was like starting to tell me she was a little scared. I was like, oh, that's good. I'm glad you're scared. Like, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. She's like, well, Dad, how did you get so brave? And I was like, hey, Ryan, let me tell you something. Like, I'm not brave. I just know that I have the ability to overcome those fears when it kicks in. Like, I'm not brave. I'm telling you, I'm scared. I get nervous. And I know that life resides on the other side of that fear is beautiful. Like, it's gorgeous. It's amazing. And so I just keep pushing through it. So we go into the pasture. She's a little nervous. We're driving around. We're having fun. And the second we get out of the pasture, I close the gate, I jump off the four-wheeler, and I grab her and give her the biggest hug. And I'm like, man, I'm so proud of you. You were so brave. That was incredible. And she's like, it wasn't that scary, Dad, right? I do the same thing when they fail. I try to do the same thing when they fail, when they fall, when they screw up. At the end of the day, the only thing I don't want my kids to do is to not try. Try to make your bed, fail. Try to make dinner, drop a plate, break it. I don't care. Like, that stuff doesn't matter to me. I just want them to try. And so I try to celebrate all of those attempts and all of those efforts, regardless of the result.
And you think for you now, if I bring it back to you and from a business professional, um, personal adventure, whatever it is, that was impactful to you as a kid. And now, like, how does that translate to what you're doing specifically? You talked about the Longhorn. By the way, I
Yeah.
think you're really a Texan at heart and not a Green Bay Packer. So but that's for another time maybe. But how else do you use that muscle, if you will, to
Yeah.
seek failure or at least challenging situations? Like, tell me more about that, how you apply it to yourself.
Well, I'm addicted to failure because the only reason we fail in life, Phil, is because we're trying something that's uncomfortable or maybe a little outside of our capabilities, right? If you know how to make a box of macaroni, you're like, oh, I'm going to try to make a box of macaroni. Like, failure is really not a possibility. Like, you know how to do it. It's pretty easy. Like, no big deal. Riding a bike is the same. Once you know how to ride a bike, your chance of failure is pretty low on a bike, right? But if all of a sudden you're going to go downhill mountain biking, which you've never done before, your chance of failure increases exponentially because you don't know how to do that. So I'm addicted to failure because failure means I'm actually challenging my own personal status quo and I'm trying to see what's possible for my life. And it's actually like the book I'm working on right now is actually about the power of failure. Like, I think we as a society have given the wrong definition or connotation to failure. I think everybody should be failing more, and the world would be a better place if we did fail more. Because through failure, we can become aware of what needs to happen next time, or what we could do differently, or what
Yep.
could be improved, or what could be avoided. And ultimately, that's where I think beauty lies, is it lies in the awareness that failure can give us.
So we've been on different calls, and you talk, like, I'll give an example. We're talking about the market and real estate
Yeah.
market, and there's also business risks, financial risk, and I think you're actually fairly conservative from an investment or business perspective, or certainly very, very thoughtful about how
Mhm.
you invest, and maybe there's a portfolio strategy. But how do you apply this to money
Yeah.
specifically? Like, what's okay to fail with?
I mean, everything. I would tell you, like, what you see from your perspective as conservative, my story is I'm greedy. And I believe that I'm at 34 years old, and I think that we have on average 3 to 4 cycles per our lifetime, like our adult lifetime, our earning potential. And so knowing where I'm at now and being fortunate to have some dry powder and be able to like have some capital to put to work, you may see it as conservative, but actually what I'm doing is I'm being greedy and I'm trying to find an opportunity where I can make 1 + 1 = 7, not 1 + 1 = 2 1/4. And so I understand like the point I'm at in my life, I'm willing to take a lot of risk for that potential upside. Um, my perspective on money, I was just telling somebody this yesterday on the airplane. I have a very weird philosophy of money, and I've picked this up actually from David. Um, but I actually believe that money is just energy, and the more we let money flow through us, the more money will flow to us. And so I don't get lost in the hoarding of money. I don't get lost in the savings of money. Yeah, I have goals to like stockpile capital to put it to work for me and stuff, but I don't stop living my life to make sure that I'm saving the right amount of money. Like, I think the second we start to try to hoard money and hold money is the second God, the universe, whatever you believe in, says, okay, I am going to start taking this from you because you aren't a good steward of this and you're hoarding it just for your own personal use and your personal benefit.
So how are you, if you're not hoarding, if you're not saving it, or if you're not, yeah, how are you spending it? Like, not
Yeah.
not from an
Yeah.
investment perspective, but how are you leveraging money to enhance your life, maybe?
Yeah, so for me, it's all about building playgrounds. And I was talking to you about this earlier. So I think that money is energy that can be put to use to build playgrounds. Now, if you look back on your life, on your childhood, maybe even like your first kiss, right? A lot of people have memories from their childhood on a playground. Pick up basketball, on the swing set. I fell and broke my tooth. I broke my arm. I went down the slide. This is where we hung out. This is how we hid from our parents, whatever, right? It's a playground. And I think as we get older, we stop playing on playgrounds and we stop building playgrounds. And so, how I'm using money right now, in addition to putting it to work for my family to build generational wealth, hopefully, is I'm trying to build playgrounds every step of the process. So, some people will look at what I'm doing with the ranch and they see a ranch. But honestly, Phil, what I'm doing is I'm building playgrounds. I'm building a place that the first Saturday we owned the ranch, 6 Longhorns from Craigslist got dropped off. My parents were there. My grandmother was there, who's 88. My daughter, my son, my wife. When the ATV got dropped off, they all thought I was crazy. When the next one got dropped off, they all thought I was crazy. But there goes my 88-year-old grandmother ripping around the driveway on a 50cc ATV for kids with a smile bigger than Texas. So for
Yeah.
me, how I'm looking at using my money right now, again, in addition to building generational wealth, is I want to build memories. Like, I want to build playgrounds. I want to create memories that last a lifetime for my friends, for my family, for my loved ones, for myself, for my community. I mean, we talked a little bit about what I'm doing this weekend for my kids' summer celebration, right? Like, I'm trying to basically be a conduit where people can make memories through the experiences that we have together. And I think at the end of the day, like, that's what life is all about.
And you referenced the book before, I think on the pre-call only, but Die with Zero. But
Yeah.
also, like, what comes to mind, or what I see, is the limiting belief around money, and that I can either spend money and build memories or build playgrounds with it, or not and, but or I can maybe build generational wealth.
Hmm.
And I think you're going to tell me it's not or, it's and.
Hmm.
Like, reframe my mindset on that for me.
Look, man, I think again, God, the universe, whatever you believe in, when he looks down and sees that you're a good steward of wealth, or the universe looks down and sees you're the good steward of wealth, what it tells its being or its energy is, hey, this person can handle more, because they're not just looking out for their own family and their own generation. This is a person that's bringing people along on this journey. They're creating memories for families. They're incorporating grandparents. They're bringing along friends. They're giving to people inside of the community. They're donating, very kindly. So I think what ultimately happens then is money, like energy, starts to flow through you,
Yep.
meaning more can flow to you. And then you do have the ability for the and, where it's like, wow, how fortunate are we to do the ranch and buy this business? How fortunate are we to do the party and invest in this real estate asset? And I think a lot of people think it's either or. And at the end of the day, if you open up your mind to what else could be possible, I think you'll discover that and is actually the most likely and the most fun to experience.
I'll just say for the first of all, great. Thanks for clearing that for me, because while I understand and I maybe thought where you I knew where you'd go with that. That doesn't mean I don't have limiting beliefs around this. And like, so we're taking a small trip to Boston and Acadia, and we're like, at Acadia, we're like, do we stay at Bar Harbor or do we stay off the island and farther away, and lack of access? Like, oh, I'm such a tight, you know what, like it.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, okay, I have to rethink. Like, we are creating a memory, and those memories are going to be so much better if we're where all the action is and what the kids will really want to see. So I'm working on it, but I don't have this figured out. And I don't know if this is a Midwestern conservative, whatever it is, but I'm still working on that too. The book Die with Zero, by the way, just a great, I don't know
Awesome.
if it's been mentioned before or not on this, but it's awesome. And like any book, read it and then reflect on it and see how it applies to you and maybe what you can
Yeah.
shift. So,
Look, the thing I'll add, Phil, is like I'm still working on it too. So I was telling this guy yesterday on the plane, he's like, we were kind of talking about it from the perspective of abundance and scarcity.
yeah.
And he's like, so how do you avoid scarcity? I'm like, you don't avoid it. You just recognize it and choose otherwise when it shows up. So, the other day I was at a restaurant and I was traveling by myself and I was eating breakfast and the bill was like $17. And I was like, oh, I should probably tip like $2. But really, what did they do? And like I caught myself like getting into all of these stories around the tip. And I immediately just shut those stories off and tip the person $100. Like, because I want my being and my body to be into abundance at all times. And I know that's not possible, but I'm trying to show myself, I'm trying to train myself that when we fall into scarcity, we are going to quickly bounce back into abundance. And so, like what you're talking about with your family trip, if you choose to stay off the island and stay in a place that, while maybe cheaper, is also, a little less convenient, what you're telling the universe, what you're telling yourself, what you're telling your family is we're going to sacrifice what's best for us because, we don't want to spend the money. And so even though it's a little inconvenient, we're just gonna stay here. And then, you start to think about that with your kids' education. You start to think about that with like opportunities for your children. And you go like, do I really want them to have those same patterns and habits? And so you just change it one day at a time and like one moment at a time. And it never goes away, but you have to think of those choices and that abundance and scarcity like a sine wave graph that has like the big looping ups and downs, right? The goal isn't to only stay at the peaks because that's not possible in life. But the real goal in life is to decrease the distance between the peaks and the valleys. Like the less valley we have and the less peakiness we have and the more up and to the right, steady, gradual we have, like the better I think our lives will be. So I'm not striving for perfection. I haven't escaped scarcity mindset completely. But what I have done is I have continued to lean into training myself to not get lost in scarcity and choose abundance when it does show up.
Well, so you talked about goals and up and to the right, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So first of all, you mentioned it, but 34 years old. So you guys are listening. I mean, if you didn't say that, I think people would be thinking,
He's probably
this.
70.
Huh?
I'm old
Okay, you said
soul.
it, not
I'm
me,
old
but
soul.
I
I'm
was
an
going to
old
say
soul, man.
68 or so, double. Um, but how much of this is by design? And like when you think forward 3, 5 years, what does that look like? How do you think about that? And then what are you doing now to create that?
My whole life is by design. And again, I was on this plane yesterday and I was showing somebody how I audit my network. So I literally have a process by which I write my 5 core values across the top and I rate every single person that comes into my life, whether they're out of alignment, somewhat in alignment, or totally in alignment with my core values. I rate my wife, I rate my children, I rate my employees, my friends, my family, every single person I come into contact with, because I believe that really what life is all about is living intentionally, like living with a purpose. And it's not about like, oh, it has to be tied to the money, or oh, it has to be tied to this. Like that, that's not it for me. Ultimately life is about for me is living intentionally. It's like living a life by design. and not by design of someone else's choice, but by design of my choice. So I have goals. I've gone through a goal setting process for the last 10 years. I learned this process from David Osborne. I wouldn't say I've mastered it quite like he has, but I'm pretty freaking close. I set about 85 goals personally, about 80 goals professionally every single year.
Wow.
I have a habit tracker that if you read James Clear's Atomic Habits book, he'll share the tracker with you. I track my habits on a monthly basis. I have a 5-year vision that I'll review 25 times this year. I have a 50-year vision that I'll review 10 times this year. I have a vision board that hangs over my dresser that I look at every single day when I get my socks on. So like, for me, it's all intentional. Like there's very few things I do in my life that aren't intentional right now. And that's because I'm planning for what my life looks like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 50 years. Like I want to be able to have the life my way and by my design, not by, societies or Facebook's or somebody else's, right? And so I'm just constantly trying to program my mind and my being. This is where we're going.
Is I mean 80 goals, I forget, 80 and 85 personal and professional,
Yeah.
really intentional. Is that help me understand, like, is that feel overwhelming ever to try to accomplish all these things and be
Yeah.
disciplined and intentional, or am I thinking about that the wrong way?
So I think it feels very overwhelming at first. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they try to go from 0 goals to 160 goals. Yeah, that's overwhelming as heck. But what I did was I went from 0 goals to 5 goals to 10 goals to 50 goals to 100 goals to 160 goals. And then all of a sudden you see like, this isn't that overwhelming. This is just the power of habit, the power of momentum. It's no different, Phil, than if you haven't run at all and you said, okay, I'm going to run a marathon today. Like, yeah, that's overwhelming. You're going to
Yeah.
fail. But if you're like, well, I would like to run a marathon. So today I'm going to run a mile. Tomorrow I'm going to run 2. Then I'm going to go back to a mile. Then I'm going to go to 3. Like that's how goal setting is. It's a muscle. It takes time to develop and evolve. And so for me, like it's not the only thing it is to me, Phil, is it's empowering because I understand that I achieve approximately 85% of what I write on this piece of paper every year. And so for me, it's not overwhelming. It doesn't create anxiety. It's not scary. For me, it's like I'm in the movie Harry Potter and I have this magic wand and I can have whatever I want in my life come true 85% of the time. I just have to put it on this piece of paper, track it, hold myself accountable to it. And then all of a sudden I wake up one day and it's there, right? So like for me, it's just super, super powerful and it's super sort of exhilarating because I look like a wizard. I have a magic spell and all it is honestly is intentionality.
And all of a sudden your life starts to fall into place, and it's by design and it's intentional. Help me though, for a listener. Okay, I'm not good at goal setting. So we're about halfway through the year when this comes out. I
Yeah.
either didn't set goals for 2024 or I did
Yeah.
and I'm just not following through. Like,
Yeah.
give me the base. What should I do?
So the first thing you have to do is you have to reprogram the language you use. So like we're working with our kids right now to eat better. And so when our kids say, I don't like this, what we say immediately is you're learning to like it. You're still learning to like it. So the person that's listening going, I'm not a good goal setter, or I don't set goals, or I don't whatever, like eliminate that language all immediately. And the first thing you have to do is say like, I am not a goal setter yet. The number one word we should all be using in our language is yet. I'm not the father I want to be yet. I'm not the husband I want to be yet. I'm not the health freak that I want to be yet. And when you start to use that word yet, what you're telling your subconscious mind and what you're telling your being is there's still a chance we could become this. Like, let's go out and seek this, right? The mind and the body really want to solve problems. And so when you use the word yet, now you're telling your mind and your being like, well, we actually want this. So let's go figure it out. So the first thing I would do is I would change the language I use. The second thing I would do is I would take a journal and it would be an empty journal and I would go someplace that inspires me. I'd go by myself and I'd probably turn off my phone. And I would sit, whether it's in nature, whether it's at a coffee shop, whether it's at my cabin, wherever it was for you and for the listener, I would go sit somewhere and I would just write down, the year is 2029. Wow, isn't life beautiful? And then I would just let whatever flows flow. We have 3 kids. The house is white. The dog is a lab. The car is pink. I can't believe I love playing golf. My husband loves yoga. My wife loves this. Like I would just let my mind and my being flow on that piece of paper and just keep going. Like, don't get lost in reading it. Don't get lost in judgment. Don't get lost in how is this possible, but just let yourself flow. And then what I would do is I would go back and read it and say, how do I feel? Like, do I feel excited? Do I feel inspired? Do I feel scared? Do I feel like it's not big enough? And I would tweak it. I would tell you, like, the beautiful part about writing or typing or using a pen or pencil is you can either cross it out, you can erase it, or you can backspace it. Like, nothing is set in stone forever.
Right.
So as you're reading it, if you don't like it, change it a little bit. And then once you have that sort of 5-year plan for your life, now the question is what do you have to get done in the next 12 months that moves you one step closer to that? And I would start with one goal in each of the gardens of life. So I would start with one goal from a physical nutrition perspective. I'd start with one goal from a relationship perspective. I'd start with one goal from a spiritual and contribution perspective, one goal from a bucket list adventure perspective, and then one goal from like a personal financial perspective. And I wouldn't set an intention like, I want to be a better dad. Like, that's just an intention. That's impossible to track and that's impossible to measure. But I would say 52 date nights with my kids. Okay, that means one time a week on average, we're going on a date night with our children. Like, are you going to be a better dad or not at the end of the year? Like, the answer is yes, right? So I would set a goal in each of those gardens. I would tape it on my mirror, and every day I brush my teeth, I would read those out loud.
I love that. So the other thing I would say is that it's, if you didn't do this, you can do this at any time in the year. Like, you don't need to wait on January 1st to do this. The other thing that I think is really interesting, I was just talking to someone yesterday, and the listeners will hear this, but someone told me overconsumption and under reflection. We overconsume and under reflect, and we should really spend one-to-one time on, if we read or listen to a podcast or whatever, we should spend as much time journaling, writing, and reflecting for what it means for ourselves. And I think you're just reiterating, you didn't say that ratio, but you're reiterating the point. Like, whatever you've been thinking, write it down and then plan your life around it. And then you have a system to back into what it looks like now.
Yeah.
I do want to ask, because I've had this thought. So you also said 50 years. And I've actually thought about this a little bit differently. I'm curious, but I've even thought 100 years. Yeah. Because the likelihood of where we'll be in 100 years is not on this earth. So what will I be remembered for? Or what will I be remembered for 100 years from now? And when you take that out, when you look at 100 years, it becomes a much, much bigger, quite frankly, more spiritual question than, any timeline within our lives. So tell me about your 50 years and maybe what you think of that thought process.
Yeah, so for me, and I think it's beautiful, you're thinking 100 years in advance. Like, for me, it's about just making sure that I'm doing the actions over the next 50 years to leave the world a better place. And I'm not egotistical and delusional and think like I can change the world or I can solve this. But I do believe, and I do know without a doubt in my mind, that I can leave the world a better place, whether that be through one impactful connection, whether that be through bringing water to a country. I'm not sure what it's going to look like for me yet, Phil, but I am confident I can leave this world a better place. And so for me, when I'm thinking through my 50-year vision, I'm thinking less about how I'm remembered, and I'm thinking more about how the King name is remembered. Like, I don't want it to just be Matt King was blank. I want it to be like, that King family was blank. Like, I want it to be generational. I want my kids to have and be able to wear that same sort of badge of honor, if you will. I want them to be good stewards of opportunity and experience for people. I want everybody in my family to make the world a better place. And so my 50-year vision is all about how we as a family, as a unit, are leaving the world, our community, our families, everything we touch better than we found it, to the best of our abilities, and not letting things be held captive by our own limitations. So I think a lot of times what happens is we as people start to think through, how will I be remembered? How will I be remembered? But at the end of the day, thinking that way means that the only way to be remembered is through the best possible version of yourself. And I like to think, like, what else could be possible? Like, who do I have to become in order to attract people far better, far more talented, far more successful than me, that can help me in this journey of leaving the world a better place, such that I am no longer the ceiling or the floor of what's possible inside of my family. Like, I want it to be even greater. So that's kind of how I'm thinking through a 50-year vision. Like, 100 years is really interesting, and I should probably do that. I probably will do that, thanks to the little challenge concept here of like thinking through what that could look like, and especially more from a spiritual side. But for me, it's all about just more than me. Like it's like I'm coming from dust. I'll return to dust. Like nobody's going to give a flying F about
Yeah.
me. But what could we do together that could leave an impact?
Well, what I like about the 50 year is it really frames, your kids will be their low 50s, which is
Yeah.
really, I think, a high impact time of their life. And when you
Yeah.
start to think about you, like, in 50 years from now, you're going to be active, but also observing the impact and proud of the impact they have is certainly
Yeah.
the 50-year goal and vision, which means right now, the things you're talking about when they're 5 or 3 or, not even here is super important in framing their mindset for the long term. So I really, really like that. I want to jump back to network a little bit because you talked about it. So first of all, you rate your wife. How does
Yeah.
that go? Like that sounds dangerous.
Yeah, look, man, I rate my wife because how I'm rating my wife is actually a reflection of how I'm showing up in the relationship, not how she's showing up in the relationship.
Okay.
So, I'm not delusional. I know that I can only change me. I can only improve on me. And there's some key relationships in my life that regardless of what score they rank, they're not going anywhere. And so I rate those relationships as a reflection of me, not as a reflection of them, because I can't change them. I can't change my wife.
Yeah.
And so like I'll look at our core values and like one of my core values, Phil, is winning. Like I love to win. And I don't think that's a bad core value, but my wife doesn't align with that core value. She doesn't care about winning. She doesn't think it should be a core value. She wants everybody to have fun. And so when I'm going through and rating people in my world about winning, my wife's not going to get a 1. She's going to get a 0, which is like, sort of, kind of, whatever. All that does for me, Phil, is it just tells me like if I'm in a situation in work or in life where I feel as though I'm in the heat of battle and all I want to do is win, I'm probably not going to call my wife and say, I'm really frustrated. I feel like I'm losing. What should I do? Because she's going to be like, well, it doesn't matter if you win or you lose. I'll
Right.
still love you. Right. So I rate her as a reflection of me more than a reflection of her, and just like understand like, okay, where should I be leaning on her and where shouldn't I based on what core values, are in the moment. And the other thing I'll tell you is like a lot of times a negative reflection in a core value under a person is actually a slap in the face of I have not communicated appropriately what that core value means to me. And so like again, I'll look at my wife and I'll go like, yeah, I feel as though like she's not getting stuff done, right? Like one of my core values is I call it GSD, like get shit done. I just want people to get shit done. And when I look at that and see my wife isn't scoring high on the get shit done, really what that tells me is she is leaning on to-dos as a way for us to connect, and I am not staying present enough in our relationship to not have the to-dos be the conversation we're having. So that's not her fault. That's on me. So now I'm
Right.
like, okay, cool. No more active listening, purely relational listening. How was your day? What's going on? What's good? What's bad? And all of a sudden, when I do those things, she goes and solves all the problems by herself that she was bringing to me the week prior because she was just looking to connect with me.
Yeah. How, so, real estate investors, business owners, entrepreneurs listening to this, and probably maybe type A or hard driving, maybe not, but we're thinking about goals, we're thinking about objectives, maybe our spouses are not.
Yeah.
How do we stay aligned, bring them along, get them to support us, support them? Like there's, we're attracted to we're attracted to opposites a lot of times,
Yeah.
right? So how do you manage this, or what guidance would you give on how to manage this with hard
Yeah.
driving entrepreneurs?
Look, I would tell you that your spouse and your children are going to do what you do, not what you say. So if you tell them, hey, you need to set goals, they're going to give you the middle finger and say, no, thank you, right? What I did to bring my wife along on the journey is early on in my goal setting process, I made one goal in each of the gardens of my life her goal. But I didn't sit down and put this big weight on it and say, Melissa, what do you want to do this year? Because that's just not how she's wired. She would freeze up immediately and she'd be like, I don't want to have this conversation. So we would be on a walk with the dog. We'd be sitting on the couch watching TV. I'd be like, if you could go to any concert next year, what would you go to? It's like, I would love to see Garth Brooks in concert. Like, okay, cool. So like literally one year, my goal was to see Garth Brooks in concert. Now, if you know anything about me, I hate concerts. I hate crowds. I hate overpaying for food, drinks, etc. I hate parking at a concert. Like it's the least favorite thing in my world. And my wife wanted to see Garth Brooks in concert. So then all of a sudden, when we were done with the concert, I was like, man, that was so cool. That was incredible, blah, 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 right? I could literally say to her, like, I'm so glad that I made that one of my goals this year. That was an incredible experience. And now immediately in her mind, she's like, wait, when you set the goal and you actually follow up with it, now you can live this incredible life. And so fast forward to last year, my wife has become an avid goal setter. So last year she had a goal to run a half marathon, did that, had a goal to run a marathon, did that, had a goal to complete 29,029,
Wow.
did that, had a goal
Wow.
to start her own business, did that. Like, and this was a lady who 4 years ago was like, goals are stupid. Like, we go on a date night, she's like, did you check off your goal? Like, and my answer is yes, I did. But at the end of the day, like, I just showed her what was possible without any judgment towards her, whether she accepted it or not. Because this is, my goal setting journey, not her goal setting journey.
Yeah.
We're going to go together down this path regardless. It's not my job to make her do what I want her to do, but rather it's my job to bring her along when I'm doing stuff and her to bring me along when she's doing stuff. And whatever the two of us do to support each other is really all that matters.
Man, that all right there is just fantastic. And I need to re-listen to that and keep working on it. I mean, but I will say that we've come a long way. We went to we've been doing like couples planning trips at the end of the
Yeah.
year, and it's just been game changing for us to think through. And that is there's an emphasis there not on business, but on our lives, what we want to
Yeah.
create. And then we bring it back to, okay, does this cost money? And is there like, do we have to build a business or anything to support those goals? But how are we creating memories and experiences with our family, the playground, as you talked about? You talked earlier about fears. So I want to ask you some different questions about a couple of
Yeah.
topics here, but like biggest fear, like the biggest fear you've had, and how you overcame that over the last, let's say, decade and a half, whatever it might be. Like, what was, wow, how I can't believe I got through that one.
Yeah, I would say there's two of them. The first one is I'm like still overcoming it. I think I'll be overcoming it forever. My greatest fear in life is while I'm being lowered into the ground to be surrounded by the ghosts of regret. Like, I do not want to have any regrets when I die. And so like when I start to feel myself like, do we stay on the island or do we stay offshore, which is a little bit more convenient? I think through like, as they lower me in the ground, am I going to be regretful that I didn't stay on the island and I stayed away from it, right? So like I'm always constantly asking myself, like, are we going to die with the ghost of regret? My biggest fear in life, honestly, is not death, but death with the ghost of regret. They say that the richest place on earth is the graveyard because so many people die with their dreams and their passions and their goals that could have been billion-dollar ideas. I don't want that to be me. I would tell you the second sort of fear I have is that I'm not worthy. And the way that I overcome that still to this day, every day, is I say to myself, somebody's going to own a ranch. Why not me? Like, someone's going to breed longhorns. Why not me? Someone's going to speak on this stage. Why not me? Someone's going to lead this incredible group of entrepreneurs. Why not me? And I just try to continue to remind myself of like, we're not striving for perfection here, and that action beats inaction. So like I'm just trying to constantly be taking baby steps in the right direction. And I'm constantly trying to like flip the script on my fears and turn them on their head. And like, if I'm not worthy, rather than saying I'm not worthy, the question is like, well, someone's worthy of this, why not you? Like, who's to say it's not you that's worthy of this?
And first of all, I love that. Like I use the phrase fear, regret, not failure. But the clear thing to both those, regret and then be not worthy, like you've really thought about these and you've done a lot of self-awareness work to understand these and to understand yourself. And then you've leveraged the fears to reframe it and ask yourself the positive questions that make you
Yeah.
think about it differently. So I really like that.
Right.
What if you look at your network, the core values, the people you interact with, what do you observe that really frustrates you from others?
Um, I think like David taught me this concept. And if you think about a Venn diagram, which we all used in high school, right? You have those two circles and then they overlap in the middle. I think what frustrates me the most, and I'm guilty of this too, by the way, but is people's words and people's actions never in alignment with one another. And like, so you literally can sit down with a dear friend, like sit down with your children, you can sit down with yourself in the mirror and go, all right, we said we wanted to get healthier, but today at the airport, we bought a Twix and a granola bar. So like, do we really want to be healthy? And if the answer is no, that's awesome. But if the answer is yes, then are our actions in alignment with our words? And look, one Twix isn't going to change your destiny. I get that, right? But like oftentimes, like one Twix isn't all that happened, right? There's more actions there that are outside of alignment with the words of we want to be healthy. So I think what drives me the most crazy is just like so many incredibly brilliant people, brave people, successful people, great leaders, awesome stewards of opportunity in the communities they reside, not taking actions because they're too busy talking the talk and not walking the walk.
I love it. And I think the biggest frustration probably for people is their own lack of alignment between their words and their actions. Like
Yeah.
you're talking about that from a third party perspective view, but I think I'll use myself as an example. If I'm lying to myself, if I'm saying things even in my head, if I'm talking to myself, but then I do something different, that is really frustrating for me um, at a personal level. So I think building self-awareness around that and being real, and then to me, it goes back to the goal setting and building a system of accountability to hold yourself accountable to what you say is important.
Yeah, and the beautiful part about that is we can I fall out of alignment all the time. And I can fall out of alignment with excuses or I can fall out of alignment with options and solutions. And so, like, when I catch myself not in alignment, there's no judgment and shame. There's just curiosity as to what choice do I need to make to get back into alignment with those
Yeah.
choices, those words, those actions, right? And so, I think a lot of people, it frustrates themselves to be out of alignment with their words and their actions, but rather than focusing on what do I have to do to change that, they say, what do I have to do to medicate that and numb that feeling? So, okay, I'll just order that another cheeseburger. Let me go eat that extra Twix. Let me have that beer. Let me escape into some drugs, whatever it could be, right? Let me go scroll Facebook. And they find an escape rather than facing that actual frustration and that pain and saying, like, wow, I see you, I hear you. You know that you're not in alignment. Let's go choose something different.
Yep. I like that a lot. Um, so if you step back, you've been on this journey, personal, married, but young kids, business, professional, like just a crazy amount of growth. And for other people, I mean, you're impacting a lot of people. I didn't say that, but you are I mean, you can just hear it from what you're talking about, being on stages and in a lot of different ways. What, how does what you do, how does it make you feel?
You know, man, this is going to sound like a little bit of negative self-talk, but I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. So right now I feel a little bit empty. I feel a little bit frustrated. And more than anything, I feel excited because I feel like I have a voice inside of me that has the ability to impact so many more people in such a more meaningful way. And I feel like a caged lion trying to get out. And so right now I'm really focused on how do I really impact more people in more meaningful ways? How do I get out of my own way? How do I stop having the limiting beliefs around a newsletter or social media or speaking on stages or coaching calls or whatever it could look like? And I'm just saying, like, I'm going to be the best possible version of myself that I can be for every person I come in contact with. And it's humbling, man. Like, it's really, really humbling. I can't quite put a finger on why I feel the way I feel, but I just feel as though I'm just getting started and I feel like a little frustrated that I'm not doing more. But I mostly feel excited that more is possible.
And you're frustrated with what you've done or where you're at, or does the frustration come from this is what I see can be done, and there's clarity to that, but not there's clarity of what can be done, but not all the steps of how to get there. Like, is this a past thing or a future thing?
It's a past and a current thing. Like it's a, I wish I would have impacted more. Why haven't I impacted more? Why did I say no to podcasts for the longest time? Why didn't I speak on more stages? Why haven't I written the book? Like it's that negative self-talk and frustration of like, I should have been doing more along the way, but I use the self-talk of I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough or who am I to share this, that, or the other as reasons why not to take action. And I'm looking back on those times feeling frustrated, going, like, why not you? Somebody had to do it. Somebody was going to do it. Why not you? And so, like, that leads to the excitement of the future. But when I feel like frustrated, I feel frustrated because I used other people's labels and definitions and the narratives inside of my own head from other people to stop me from taking action on what I wanted to do for my life.
Well, maybe there's something to this where there's an exponential impact of waiting, and you are best suited to help people that were in the situation like your past self,
Yeah.
and maybe you're this is why, like, we can't connect the dots forward. We don't know why what has happened, but I can just say that you have had a great impact on a lot of people. You're doing awesome work. I'm very glad you've decided to go in the podcast circuit and speaking, because I get the direct, or our listeners really get the
Yeah.
direct benefit, and I get to listen to it. So, and I think you're being a little bit too critical on yourself, if I can flip the switch a little bit, because you're doing great things, and
Thanks,
I
man.
want you to keep it up. What has been your
Thanks.
key factor to success, and what will it be?
Intentionality. Like I've studied so many successful people, and I would tell you the number one thing I see from all successful people is they live really freaking intentional. From the way they manage their emails to the way they manage their calendars to the way that they set appointments in their life. The most successful people are intentional. They understand that we're only on this earth for a very finite amount of time, and that the way to actually live abundantly is to maximize every freaking minute.
What for That's fantastic. Purpose, intentional, extreme ownership, all those things.
All of
You,
it.
you live those things. I can see it. And for our listeners, I mean, you can hear it, but Matt's 100% doing it. What has been the most impactful real estate or business book that you've read?
There's so many, right? Like As a Man Thinketh, Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad's incredible. I think if I was talking to your listeners who, let's say most of them are in real estate, I would tell y'all to not focus so much on real estate, but focus more on leadership. Because at the end of the day, real estate is, the good or the service that you're selling or you're transacting. If you really want to grow beyond just that single transaction, what you need to focus on, from my perspective, is being the best leader you can possibly be. Because if you can take your real estate practice, whether it's transactional or investing, and go from I do it to we do it to they do it, now you can bring people along on the journey. You can give them an opportunity inside of your organization to achieve their dreams, but you can take that energy and you could go pour it elsewhere. And I think the number one thing to do is to focus on leadership. Good to Great's a great book. Like there's so many good books about leadership. And I would just take all of those principles and apply them to real estate or investing or whatever industry I was in.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, whether it, like, focus on your interactions with people, not buildings,
That's
right?
right.
If you focus on your interactions with people, you can accumulate whatever buildings you want, whatever real estate, like it, because the
Yeah.
people think, by the way, you can do that with real estate or any business too. So
Yeah. Anything.
what about personal development, like a personal development book?
I mean, I love Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. I think ego is the thing that gets in all of our ways. And if you can figure out how to have an ego death earlier in your life, and by the way, many of us are going to have multiple ego deaths, and that's okay. But I think if you can figure out how to detach from ego, you're going to find a much more beautiful world to live in and exist in. As a Man Thinketh, again, is one of my favorites. I think that's an incredible book. Die with
Give
Zero is great. There's so many.
give me a minute on ego, because I've been thinking about ego a lot and
Yeah.
like understanding it. Like what does ego mean to you, and how do people misunderstand it?
Yeah, so for me, ego is like a life vest when you're swimming. Like you think that thing is there to save your life, but at the end of the day, that thing is there because you don't really know what you're doing, right? Like a child wears a life vest, yes, to save their life, don't get me wrong, but they wear the life vest because they don't know how to swim. I think ego is the life vest for our lives. Like ego shows up because we're afraid to be humble and vulnerable and say, I don't know what to do. And so ego comes in and dominates and controls so that we don't have to look weak or vulnerable. Let me put it this way. We don't have to look vulnerable, which many of us describe or define as weak, right? But what if vulnerability was actually a strength? What if being vulnerable and asking for help was a superpower? What would your life
Yeah.
look like then? And so
Yeah.
for me, ego is this false sense of reality, this false sense of security that's showing up because we're actually a little bit scared. And if we can let that fear go and just embrace the vulnerability and ask for help, ask for support, and remain curious, all of a sudden, all of these beautiful people will come to our aid and help us in ways we never thought were possible.
Yeah. And honestly, I said I thought about this, and similarly, like I had this intention of, do I start a podcast? What do I do? And the reason I think, as I dig into it, I didn't do it, is because of ego, because I was too worried about what other people would think of me,
Yeah.
which some people think is a positive trait, and maybe it is, but it's really just my ego getting in the way of saying, who cares? Like, what about the people that I can impact that might go impact other people? So I just think ego can be misunderstood. So I really appreciate your
Yeah, I
response on
appreciate
that.
you asking, man.
Um, First of all, what are you excited about moving forward, and how can listeners find out more about Matt King?
Yeah, look, I'm excited that my wife's doing a home birth for our third child. It'll be a pretty cool experience. I'm excited that my kids are going to experience the first longhorn calves hitting the ground at our ranch in around August. I'm excited that we're doing a lot of really cool stuff with the GoBundance community. I'm excited about my book that I hope to have finalized by the end of this year. Um, Man, I'm excited to just be alive. Like, it sounds so cliche, but it's just, there's so much opportunity in this world. It's so cool. And from following perspective, like, Instagram is by far the most channeled platform for me. Like, that's where my team and I spend most of our energy and time right now. And it's just mattking.atx because we live in Austin, Texas. I have a newsletter that people can subscribe to. The people that subscribe to the newsletter will get chapters of the book early. I'm starting to do free coaching calls for people just as a way to give back and build more content. So if anybody wants a free coaching call, just
sign up for that, folks.
Direct message me or whatever the cool kids say. And yeah, man, if I can ever be of help, like, my email is just Matt@GoBundance. If anybody needs anything, just reach out to me. And the cool thing is, Phil, like, I can say that on a stage, I can say that on a podcast, I can say that on a billboard. And at the end of the day, most people won't reach out to me because of ego. They're afraid of what I will think if they ping me. So I can share all of this stuff and know that most people won't actually send the email because they're going to be judging themselves and critical of themselves rather than saying, wow, that would be a fun opportunity.
Take up the challenge, guys and girls. Like, reach out to Matt. He's phenomenal. He's helped me think through a lot of different things in our business, how we structure things. So Matt, first of all, it's clear to me, I want to close with, you're clearly a converted Green Bay Packer to, I don't know if it's Texas Longhorn or Houston Texans or what is it? Texas Longhorn.
Yeah.
Man, I think as a Packer, I think you're a diehard Packer. So I don't think that's completely true. But Matt, I greatly, joking aside, all this conversation, goal setting, the playgrounds, vision, ego discussion, all that is very, very much appreciated, helpful to me, like you have been so much. So I greatly appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me, man. I love what you're doing for your community. I love what you're doing with the show, and thank you so much for inviting me to be on.
Matt, thank you. This is Phil with the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Muller Real Estate, visit our website at www.mullerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.